Hi, my name is Jennifer Luarca. I'm an academic coach at the Learning Center, and this short workshop is going to focus on successful strategies for attending live virtual lectures. Let's begin. Our topics for today are going to be preparing for lecture, then we're going to focus on a little bit on what to do during class, and then also we're going to touch on connecting with peers and troubleshooting events that might occur during lecture. So, live lecture, or what we're calling synchronous lecture, is an academic way of saying that the lecture is live, most likely on Zoom or another platform. Lecture time will usually be the time of the class, whatever's on your schedule, and you'll be responsible for attending lecture, and oftentimes you may still be responsible for viewing something before you attend the class, or just like with regular classes and live, like in the real world, we're usually responsible for reading or being prepared for class. Make sure that you have your notifications set up in Beachboard so that you're notified if you do have to view a video or do some sort of activity or participate in some way before the lecture begins. Classes might be straight lecture, or they may be discussion based. So if you're required to view a video beforehand, then the class time that you have on Zoom might be more interactive and discussion based. It all depends on the preference of the instructor. Typically with live lectures using Zoom, they're going to be recorded by default, so just be aware that the screen will be recorded and the lectures will most likely be stored somewhere. Now, just like in our regular semesters, we'll want to prepare for class. This usually is previewing content, when possible, spending about 15 to 30 minutes within 24 hours of attending class. We'll want to take a look at our textbook, read if possible, but if nothing else, skim the textbook, preview class notes, review upcoming concepts. Just make sure that you're familiar somewhat with the content that's going to be covered. We also want to make sure and prepare our learning space. So removing clutter, unnecessary books, or distracting items from our desktop or our hard surface that we're learning on. Gathering learning materials we may need, notebooks, pen, our device, paper, that type of thing. We want to get our snacks ready, so it sounds silly, but a granola bar and some water so that if you get hungry during lecture, you're not tempted to get up and walk away. We'll want to also make sure that our phones are on silent, that we're muted when we join. Most likely you'll be muted when you join or when you're admitted into the classroom, but just in case, make sure that you're muted so no ambient noise gets in. And then you'll want to let your housemates know, hey, I'm going to be in class for the next hour, just so that they're not tempted to distract you as well. If possible, we want to find a space where we can sit upright, have your device in front of you, a hard surface to write on if possible. So a desk is ideal, but if you're working on top of a bed, sitting on the bed with your back against the wall and maybe a hard book to write on might be helpful for you. Now, I recommend you arrive to lecture about 5 or 10 minutes early to set up and troubleshoot any issues, as most of us have experienced. Things don't go as smoothly as we'd like all the time online, so you may need to get there, log on, make sure, close any tabs. You may have to restart your device. Maybe you have an internet issue, right? So arriving a little early helps just reduce the stress associated with logging on and getting ready. We'll also want to make sure we arrive early to minimize any tabs or disable notifications that might come through during class. Again, just to reduce the distraction available to us during school or during class. We'll want to make sure, if possible, that our background is clean and still. I know that's a challenge. It's a challenge for me. I have children, I have dogs, I have a husband, a lot of things going on in the background, and I don't have my desk in a place where my back is against a wall. I'm working in my living room. So when possible, I ask everybody to just go to different spaces in the apartment, but that's not always possible. So using some sort of virtual background might be the best option. And then also, when we're talking about being on Zoom, studies show that we have a tendency to watch ourselves. We gravitate towards that. So if you arrive early and you have the time, we want to hide our face on Zoom if possible. Then everybody else can see us, but we're not tempted to just stare at ourselves on the screen. So in order to hide your face on Zoom, you'll want to start or join your Zoom meeting. The meeting automatically begins in speaker view so you can see your face. What you'll want to do is right click your video for the display menu and choose hide myself. Again, others will see you, so it's not like you disappear. They'll still be able to see you. It's just you won't have the tendency to focus or hyper focus on your own face. All right, so once we're in class, we're there, we're prepared, we're ready to go. What do? We want to take notes. If possible, we want to take notes on paper. I know a lot of us like to take notes on devices because we're fast typers, but the research shows if we handwrite notes, we tend to remember information better. Also, having multiple windows up on the same screen, so your lecture window and a document for note taking, that can clutter up your virtual space. It can also slow down your processing systems, so it can really cause some issues in regards to focus and processing. So when possible, write on paper. Focus on writing down or getting down items that the instructor elaborates on, spends a lot of time on, or repeats often. Also, we want to include notes if we can, or examples in our notes if we can. So if an instructor spends a lot of time describing photosynthesis and then gives examples of that process, we'll want to make sure and note that in our notes, right? Spent 30 minutes on this, gave 2 examples, and here's one example that I remember. Oftentimes examples end up as test questions later, but they also help to illustrate concepts that we're learning. Most students will try to write down definitions, and that's not really necessary during class. We can look the definition up in a lot of other places. The textbook, PowerPoint, we can Google it, right? Definitions are available. Instructor examples aren't always available in other places, so when possible, we want to write those down. Now, as soon as possible after class, we'll want to review our notes and make sure that they're clear and they're useful for later. I like to think about our future self in 2 or 3 weeks. Will these notes make sense? If you don't think so, you want to add a little context so that it jogs a memory when you're using them to study. Also, I would recommend for the purposes of virtual learning, we'll want to start to build a little key term portion at the very top of our notes. So in the large margin at the top of the page, if we just write down key terms or concepts discussed for that day, right there, it makes it really easy for us to find and track concepts as they're discussed throughout the weeks. Now, when we're sitting in our live lecture, this is great because we have the opportunity to participate, whereas in recorded lectures, we don't have that opportunity. So, we want to interact. This is what's really going to help us stay focused and help us begin to process information and even just clarify concepts. So if you're unsure how to interact in the class, refer to the syllabus that may be indicated there, or you can always ask. I know when I start my lectures, I usually tell students if I want them to use the chat function or if I want them to unmute and speak. So it may change day to day, or it may be set for the whole semester. Check your syllabus. When in doubt, email or ask the instructor. Now, when you're participating, you can ask questions for clarification. When they're discussing assignments, pop on, ask questions for sure. And then definitely we want to participate and engage in discussion. This will require preparation on your behalf, so you may even want to jot down some notes as to what you might want to bring up in discussions in class. But spending a few minutes to prepare for those discussions can really help you feel comfortable speaking, and it can make you look really well prepared for discussion that day. Now, how do we look on screen, right? So I talked about us wanting to look at ourselves. That's just innate. We are drawn to look at our own faces if they're available to us. But if we're hiding our face, then we want to also still look interested and still look engaged. And this matters a lot on Zoom or other virtual learning platforms because unlike in the classroom where we just kind of scan the room and look at faces once in a while, here we're sitting for an hour or more staring at everybody's face and it's right there in front of us. There's no hiding. So you want to make sure that the nonverbal cues you're giving in class are helpful or, showing that you're interested in the content. So We want to make sure we're looking at the screen, we're looking at the speaker, wherever they may land on the screen. When we're speaking, we want to look at our webcam. That way it looks like we're looking at everybody else that's watching. If we focus on ourselves or another speaker, to the other viewers, it might look like you're looking in a different part of the screen. We also want to monitor our nonverbal communication. Facial expressions are amplified on Zoom because it's just our face right there. Head nods, falling asleep, right? These are things that are super obvious now, and in most cases, they're recorded. So we want to make sure that, if we're not able to monitor our body language and our facial expressions, maybe a discussion is a sensitive topic for you and you can't help but make facial expressions, then if you don't think they're productive to the discussion, go ahead and turn your video off. That would be the best situation or best thing to do in that situation. And then if you need to move around or leave for a second, if you got to go to the restroom, if you need to get a snack, if your child is talking to you, whatever it might be, make sure you're muted and make sure you shut off your video while you take care of whatever it might whatever might be happening in front of you. If you get a delivery at the door, right? There's all kinds of things happening now that we can't control. What we can control is turning off our videos so not everybody in class is watching what's going on in your house. All right, so we made it through lecture. We prepared ahead of time. We sat in, we participated. And now what do we do after lecture to make sure we remember? We want to first take about 5 or 10 minutes to plan our study and clarify our notes for future use. So as I said, we want to make sure these notes are going to make sense to us, make sure our thoughts are complete, and then we want to sit there and say, when I'm studying later, what parts do I want to focus on first? What are my weaker concepts? Let me start with those, and then the easier concepts, I'll end my study session with those. Writing down questions you may need help with right away while everything is fresh is a really great idea. It can maximize your learning time later. And it can also help direct your office hour visits with instructors, any engagement in tutoring you have, and then also peer study sessions. If you keep a running list of questions you have, then boom, when you're able to get help, it can really maximize the time you have with that helper. Now, because you're in class, you're looking at these people the whole time, we want to also engage with them in learning. So the best way to connect with your peers and start to form study groups is using the class list tab in Beachboard. In some of my classes, my students have used the chat function for that, sharing their social media platform or handles or whatever they're called, or just best ways to get in touch with them. So if that's okay with your instructor, use the chat function for that as well. But it's really important that you set up study groups. You kind of intentionally reach out to your peers and make connections. Unfortunately, because we're virtual this semester, we are not benefiting from that casual encounter with a person in our class. We have to be really intentional about setting up study time and reaching out. But we can still get really, form really good bonds and get a lot of great benefits from interacting with our peers in class. We just have to do that with more intention this semester. Now we'll want to make sure that if we do kind of form study buddy groups or those connections, that we're checking in about once a week to support each other, to clarify questions, and to get practice with the content. Now, if you have to miss lecture in the virtual space, I would recommend emailing the professor to say you'll be missing. Again, just like in a big lecture, it's easy, or even in a smaller class of 25 people, it's easy if the teacher doesn't take roll to just not notice somebody missing. But here we are with all of our squares on our screen, and we even get a number count as a teacher who's, how many students have attended our class. So it's very easy to tell who's not coming to class now. So what we'll want to do is, if you're going to miss class, shoot off an email, let them know you're missing, and request the recording of the lecture if that's available. Also want to follow up in office hours with specific questions regarding the lecture. So we don't want to go to office hours and say, I missed class, what did I miss? Or did I miss anything important? That can come off as rude. What we'll want to say is, hey, I missed class, I went ahead and reviewed the chapter that we covered, but I'm still a little unclear on this specific concept. Can you help me with that, right? So we don't ask for all of the information, we just narrow in on a specific one or two concepts that we're struggling with, okay? You can always reach out. This is another great reason why you want to form those bonds with classmates, is you can borrow notes, and you can kind of do your part to catch up before you hop in to ask questions in office hours. Now that's it for me. Super short. I hope you found some helpful tips. And I hope you think of me as a resource that can help you as you kind of traverse your way through this semester. I'm an academic coach. I'm available via the Learning Center. All of our support is online this semester. And you can schedule free academic coaching sessions with me to focus on things like time management, exam prep, reading strategies, whatever it is you're struggling with in regards to learning your content. I'm here to support you in that. You can Google academic coaching at the Learning Center at CSULB to find more information about how to schedule with me, and to also find some really helpful resources and more video tutorials about learning effectively in the online space. Thank you.